Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our class today. So today we're going to be looking specifically at the breath. When I was putting it out in the email, I said it would be a breathwork masterclass. I actually got this from my co-writer, Nadine, who I wrote Breathe, Rest, Recover with. We don't really like the word work when we talk about breathing, but it is a word that's commonly used. And I specifically want to talk about functional breathing and how this can help your health and energy. So we're going to look at that this morning or today. Now, a couple of things to remind you. Firstly, please make sure that you feel comfortable and safe. And if anything doesn't feel right for you, then always rest out. The breath, in fact, should always be gentle and never forced. So you will go to some practitioners and they will get you to do things like long breath holds or hyperventilation exercises. That's the kind of Wim Hof thing. This is not what I am teaching here. And certainly if you've got health issues, it's really important that you get yourself healthy before you do that kind of practice. So I'm really talking about getting your breath healthy and how we can restore maximum energy to the cell. And the other thing I want to remind you is you don't need to keep looking at your screen unless you want to. Sometimes I might direct you to, but most of the time you can work with your eyes closed because that's quite a nice way to help you be more intuitive. Obviously, if you don't want to have your eyes closed, that's also fine. But it's not necessary to keep looking at the screen unless you want to, because I always say, I know we look at screens too often and they can be very tiring. So I could talk, in fact, I might at some point run a whole workshop around breathing because I think it's so fundamental. I could talk just off the top of my head and do practices for hours. But what I thought, just to remind me also to make sure I don't miss anything crucial, I'm taking some of the practices from Breathe, Rest, Recover. This is the book that came out about a year ago. It was aimed at people with long COVID. So somebody's written a message. Hold on, let me just check my chat box. Could you mute? Oh, yeah. Sorry, Elisa, I'll mute everybody else just to make sure everybody is muted. So I can do that from here. That should be okay now. There we are. Yeah, Breathe, Rest, Recover. This is written kind of with the long COVID and ME population in mind. But what both Nadine and I work a lot with people with long COVID, and part of the condition, in fact, the main part of the condition is fatigue. But one thing many people with long COVID have is breathing problems. And fatigue and breathing problems are linked together. But also, when we don't breathe properly, we have other symptoms such as anxiety, panic attacks, insomnia, foggy head. So if any of these relate to you, then you might well be aware that you are not breathing functionally. So what I'm going to do this morning is talk a little bit and then we'll have a practice. I'll talk a bit more and then we'll do a practice. So we're really feeling somatically and experientially how it feels when we breathe. So just to start, I want to read something from the book, which is What is Dysfunctional Breathing? So I'm just going to give you a few pointers and you can think if any of these apply to you. Mouth breathing, movement mainly from the upper chest. So that's when we're breathing from this area, if you look at your screen, this area here rather than using the diaphragm. Audible breathing, and that sometimes happens if we've got asthma, for example. Frequent sighing, this is all to do with not getting the correct exchange of oxygen and air into the cell. Frequent yawning. Paradoxical breathing, which is when the belly moves on the inhale and out on the exhale. So those of you that come to me regularly know that when we breathe in, the belly comes in. When we breathe out, the belly lifts slightly. Sorry, that's the other way around. We breathe in, belly lifts. I was just doing paradoxical breathing. So when we breathe in, the belly moves slightly. When we breathe out, the belly comes back. If we're breathing paradoxically, that reverses. So breathing in, that comes in rather than out. So that can happen. And then the classic one is breathing too fast. So before we actually start to do something, I just want to say that when we are in fear, when we're anxious, when we're having fear pushed to us for whatever reason, that very often will make us hyperventilate, meaning that we breathe too fast, we maybe breathe from the upper chest, and we might breathe from the mouth. And what that does, it disturbs the uptake of oxygen and carbon dioxide to the cell, to the mitochondria. It means we breathe off too much carbon dioxide, which can leave us feeling very spacey, not in our body, very foggy, anxious, disembodied, very tired. And it's all to do with the fact that it's not just to do with the uptake of oxygen to the cell, it's also that we need carbon dioxide. We need the correct exchange of gas and air for our energy. And in yogic terms, this is all about the flow of prana, because the breath is considered to be the main source of prana or energy. And also in some traditions, prana or the breath is translated as spirit, inspiration, but it's also to do with our spirit. So with that all said, I'd like you to come to a comfortable sitting position, if that's okay for you. And if you need to lie, that's also fine. And we're just going to start very simply with a check-in. And the most important thing with this check-in is that you don't judge anything. So I want you, as soon as I ask you to check in, automatically your breath starts to slow down. But I want you just to observe, was I breathing from my upper chest? Was my mouth open? Was I sighing a lot? Do I need to yawn a lot? Do I wake up in the night gasping, dribbling? These are all signs that we're hyperventilating. So with your eyes closed, just feel into your body, come into the present moment if you're able to, and just observe your breathing without judgment. So you're making this a compassionate inquiry. And if you can, just let the breath begin to slow down. If you can, breathe through the nose, but if you can't breathe through the nose, that's all right. Everything is all right. And then come back to your normal breathing rhythm and just relax, stop observing. And I'm going to ask you just for a moment to look at your screen because I want to demonstrate something. I'm going to exaggerate it, but this is very commonly how we breathe if we're anxious. It becomes a chronic way of breathing, and then we might be breathing like this throughout the day. So if you watch my chest, so my shoulders and my chest are moving. And it will be helpful when you're not in the class if you practice this in the mirror and just see what part of the body is moving. Is it this area here, or are you breathing lower down? And when we start to breathe, hyperventilate, this makes our thoughts go faster, our thinking becomes speedy, we become more anxious. Critically, we don't feel safe. So it can set up all kinds of anxious feelings just by not breathing. I mean, it has the most incredible impact on our energy and our well-being and our thinking. And just slowing the breath down can begin to help. But what we're aiming to do is to begin to use the diaphragm. So the diaphragm is a large sheet muscle attached to the back of the ribs and the spine. And as we breathe in, the diaphragm drops down, so the belly slightly comes out, but not too much. As we breathe out, as we breathe in, so that the diaphragm drops down, the belly lifts slightly. As we breathe out, the belly relaxes down again. So begin to practice this. Take both hands now to just below the belly button, and just breathe in to the hands. And what I'm going to suggest is that you have your middle fingers touching, and as you breathe in, that middle finger spaces apart. As you breathe out, the middle finger comes back together. So we're just reminding the body of the diaphragm. And if you have the energy, on the exhalation, just slightly draw the navel into the spine, just to tone the diaphragm. Because the diaphragm's a muscle like anything else, and it can become untoned. Incidentally, you can help to tone the diaphragm by lying on your back and placing a bag of sugar or something heavier, bag of rice on your belly, and breathing in and out. Breathe through your nose if you can. And as you continue to breathe, just observe the journey of the breath, which bits of the body are moving and which are still, again, without any judgment. And now release your hands down. And again, with your eyes closed, if that's okay for you, just observe, return to normal breathing, observe how you're feeling now. Observe the mind, observe the body, observe the emotions. Just see if anything's changed, even if it's subtle. And if nothing's changed, that's fine too. Now, as you continue to observe, I'm just going to read out some of the signs of breathing dysfunctionally. I've already mentioned some of them. Shortness of breath, insomnia, asthma or COPD, chronic cough, allergies, postural issues, because your posture is very much tied up with your breath and how you breathe, heartburn, migraines, muscle cramps and muscle pains. It's because the breath is all to do with circulation, of course. Exercise intolerance, post-exertion malaise, poor memory or brain fog, blood pressure dysfunction, constipation, IBS, fatigue, dizziness, cold hands and feet, again that's circulation. We've put here recurrent infections. That's because how we breathe has a massive impact on our immunity as well. Anxiety and panic attacks. And also, just to explain that we get anxiety and panic attacks if we're hyperventilating because we're breathing off so much carbon dioxide that it changes the pH in the brain. And then we get this very weird feeling of not being in our bodies, being dispersonalized, makes us feel very panicky, which is where we need to start to breathe functionally. I've got something on my YouTube channel to help with panic attacks and anxiety, incidentally. And then heart rate irregularities. So it also, obviously, breathing, lungs affects the heart. Everything affects everything else. But how we breathe also affects the health of our heart. So this is why it's also important how we breathe. But when we start to breathe functionally, it can make us feel a bit panicky and spacey because our brain is not used to how we are changing our breathing pattern, particularly if we've been used to breathing off a lot of carbon dioxide. It can feel very strange when we begin to re-regulate, because what we're doing is we're training the brain back to healthy breathing. So what we're going to do now, we're going to do two breathing movements. We're going to do, again, something you'll be quite used to doing with me. We're going to do the coherent breath or samana breathing. So that's equal inhale and equal exhale. And then we're going to do the humming breath, because humming helps to increase nitric dioxide, which helps with all kinds of functions in the body. It increases oxygen uptake to the cell, and it helps with our immunity. It has all kinds of things. Again, in the book, there's more on that. So let's start with the coherent breath. So for this, we're going to have an equal inhalation and an equal exhalation. So I'm going to suggest that you use a ratio of counting, but if you don't want to count, that's fine. So you might like to breathe in for 3 and out for 3, or you might like to breathe in for 4 and out for 4. So when you're ready, close your eyes, choose your comfortable ratio and just see how that is for you. And if it's not okay, remember everything should be gentle and not forced. Sorry, there's a message here. Yeah, the banging noise is because it's very windy here. So what I'm going to do is put my earphones in, because the banging noise is actually banging my window even though it's closed. So let me just put my headphones in. Can you hear me now? Can you give me the thumbs up? Yeah, okay. You won't get the background noise now. Okay, sorry about that. So coherent breathing, Samana breathing, equal inhalation, equal exhalation. And what I'd like you to do as you do this is just observe how you're feeling now, and then go for the coherent breath. We'll do it for a couple of minutes, and then see if you have any differences in how you're feeling physically or mentally. And also, you're going to, with the coherent breath, we want to slow it down. So we're aiming for 6 to 8 breaths a minute. But if that's too much for you, you mustn't force anything. But it's just helping us to slow the breath right down. So just experiment with that. And then come back to your normal breathing rhythm. And again, just observe if that's had any effect on your system. Has it begun to calm the nervous system down? Because when we talk about regulating the nervous system, and I'm going to do a class around a dysregulated nervous system next week, nervous system regulation is very much to do with the breath. That was interesting, Jill, because I just saw you yawning then. And again, that's because you're changing the gas and air, you're changing the pattern of your breathing. So that's fine, don't worry about it. But just, again, just to observe how it's subtle, but very powerful. And of course, breathing is the key thing that affects the vagus nerve. I've talked about the vagus nerve a lot, about how vagal tone, polyvagal theory is essential for our health and well-being. And regulating the breath leads to healthy vagal tone. So now we're going to try the humming breath. So you can do this 3 to 5 times. Breathe in through your nose, humming the breath out through pursed lips. So just try that one. Again, you're quite familiar with it, but I'm giving you more reasons as to why we do it. It's not just some random practice. And when you finish, again, just do the check-in. How has that affected me? And I just want to talk a little bit more in yogic terms now. So in terms of science, I've talked about the mitochondria, the diaphragm, nasal breathing. In terms of yoga, there are different parts of the breath. There's 4 parts of the breath: the inhalation, pause after the inhalation, exhalation, pause after the exhalation. And we can play about with those 4 parts in order to create certain effects on the mind and on our health. So, for example, if we extend the exhalation, that is said to be the energy of apana, detoxifying and letting go. Now, in terms of science, we know that when we lengthen the exhalation, that brings in the parasympathetic division of the nervous system. So it takes us out of fight and flight, it takes us out of a activated stress response, it helps to calm the system down. So you can see how the ancient yogis knew wonderful things and the science kind of backs it up. Equally, we can pause after the exhalation. A lot of these master breathing workshops that you go to now are about doing extended holds after the exhalation. That's not something I would ever do with people with ME, long COVID, or autoimmune disease, because we need to regulate our breath first. That's something maybe for later. So, the kind of Wim Hof method is not for us yet. But we're going to try that now. So we're going to combine something. We're going to extend the exhalation and we're going to combine it with movement. So I will demonstrate this now. So you can look at your screen just for this bit. So we're going to inhale and lift our arms, and then slowly, slowly, long, smooth exhalation, we're going to lower the arms. So the out breath is longer than the in breath. Inhaling up, keep the shoulders relaxed. Exhaling, slow breath down. So it's like a moving meditation. And for some people, they become anxious if they're focusing on the breath. So combining breath and movement can be very helpful. Just looking in the chat. Emma's asked a question. I always sigh after doing a breathing practice. Is that a good thing? The reason you're sighing, Emma, is you are recalibrating your oxygen and your CO2 levels, and your body is trying to get used to it. And as you become more healthy with your breathing, it can be this kind of disruption to your natural cycle. So don't worry about it. The more you practice healthy breathing, you'll find that it won't happen so much. But anything is fine. Please carry on inhaling up, exhaling down. Just do that about 5 times, fewer if you are very fatigued. So you're slowing down the exhalation. And then again, just rest with the hands on your knee, or if you're lying down beside you, and observe. Has that exhalation, the longer exhalation, helped to relax you a bit more? It's a really good biohack if you're feeling stressed or anxious, is to lengthen your out breath for a few breaths. And these are all exercises you can do from lying down, if you're in bed just before you go to sleep, or when you wake up in the morning before you get up. So lengthening the out breath is a really, really good one for anxiety, or if the brain's overactive and you feel the thoughts going too fast, slow down that out breath. I'm just going to read out something more from the book before we do the next exercise. So it's about carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide, we know we blow out carbon dioxide on the exhalation. We breathe in carbon dioxide, oxygen, and other gases and airs. And then the oxygen goes to the cell, that's prana, but it needs the correct exchange of gas and airs in order to effectively feed the cell, the mitochondria. So on the in-breath, carbon dioxide signals to the brainstem that it tells the diaphragm to move downwards. And it also starts the inhalation by lowering the pH level, and this triggers breathing. Carbon dioxide makes the smooth muscles of the airways relax, so they open and let air into the lungs. CO2 also relaxes the smooth muscles in the blood vessels, so they dilate and increase circulation. Because CO2 lowers the pH of the blood, this allows for greater release of oxygen from the blood into the cells. So this is all about giving us more energy. And then what does it mean to hyperventilate? When we are stressed or anxious, we hyperventilate, which means that we are breathing too fast. Consequently, we breathe off too much CO2. This in turn keeps us in the stress response. Reduced levels of CO2 cause blood vessels to constrict and may lead to a condition known as respiratory alkalosis, characterized by an increase in blood pH levels. This impacts the delivery of oxygen to the body and the brain. So there's a lot more about that in the book. And then to hold the breath or not, the effect of low levels of CO2 is also thought to have a direct impact on many conditions such as asthma and high blood pressure. Therefore, it's important to not only address oxygen levels, but to acknowledge that low levels of CO2 in the blood compromise our health. The ability to take small, emphasize here, small pauses after the exhalation as we breathe demonstrates our ability to tolerate higher levels of CO2. Many people refer to this as breath holding. However, we prefer to call this a comfortable pause. So let's just try that now. So I'd like you to breathe in comfortably, breathe out comfortably, and then after the exhalation, don't breathe out fully, just hold the breath for 1 or 2 seconds, not too long, before you breathe in. And if that feels forced or it's too much, then don't hold. But just hold for a few seconds before you breathe in and just see how that affects you. So just breathe like that for a few breaths, maybe up to 10 breaths. And while you're doing that, I'm just going to see the question in the chat box. So Jules is asking about breath holding if we do that unintentionally. So this actually can be a trauma response, Jules. So I know you're a psychotherapist, so you know something about polyvagal theory and when we're in dorsal vagal tone or shutdown tone. So when we're kind of disengaged and we're not in a healthy vagal tone, quite often we might hold the breath. Although having said that, we can hold the breath when we're concentrating a lot. So for example, you know, if we're drawing something or writing, we can find ourselves holding the breath. But generally it's not ideal. It's also something we refer to in our book as something if we use a lot of screens, tech apnea. So that if you're using screens a lot, quite often you can find that you are holding the breath and then gasping for breath or going into hyperventilation afterwards. So the antidote to this is just whenever you're conscious of it, maybe 3 or 4 times a day, to practice healthy breathing. So yes, to hold the breath intentionally is one thing, to hold it unintentionally is something completely different. And in terms of yoga, we talk about pranayama. So pranayama, one of the translations of that is the control of conscious breathing, the conscious way we breathe. So as soon as we become conscious of our breathing, that then becomes pranayama, which is what we're doing here today. We're doing pranayama. We're doing conscious ways of looking at different ratios of breath, whether it's a hold after the exhalation or a longer exhale. We don't tend to do longer inhalation because that's too stimulating. That's a hyperventilation. So again, just come back to your normal breathing rhythm. Again, just check in how that's affected you. And in a minute, we're going to come to our yoga nidra. I'm just checking that I've not missed out anything completely critical, but what I don't want to do is to overwhelm you with too much information. And I do think it's much more important that you actually practice breathing. So the two things I would like you to take away with you from this session are breathe through the nose, breathe through the diaphragm. If you're able to, you can take your hands to your chest and to your belly just to remind you to breathe lower down rather than using the chest. To practice this whenever you remember it. And also to remember that if you want to be more relaxed and come out of any panic, then you lengthen that exhalation, you make that longer. And also that if you just want to practice a healthy breathing rhythm, practice the coherent breath or samana breathing, an equal inhalation and an equal exhalation. So I hope that's been helpful and you've got something from this. So with that said, we're going to go into our yoga nidra now. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to get ready. So I'm going to stop the recording now.